So you can start.
Okay, so hello everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Leanne Perriman. I'm a senior lecturer at the Institute of Educational Technology at the Open University in the UK, where it's the afternoon, and I'm here with my colleague Kate Lister, who's a lecturer in the School of Education, Childhood, Youth and Sports at the OU. Now, earlier this year, Kate and I produced one of the Open University's first FutureLearn-based micro-credentials. It's a postgraduate course covering embedding mental health in the curriculum. And we included a section in there on open pedagogy and well-being. We had a lot of feedback from learners in the course discussion areas, reporting on experiments with using open pedagogy in their own settings. And that was from primary schools right through to nursing training and colleges. Some of the comments and ideas gave an insight into the possibilities and the constraints that real educators are facing in real classrooms, and we'll share a few with you today. So here's what we're going to be asking today. How can mental health issues affect student study outcomes, and how can study affect mental health? How can open pedagogy help support students' mental health and well-being? In what ways might open pedagogy negatively affect students' mental health and well-being? And what can educators do about this? And how are educators using open pedagogy to support well-being and mental health? So first, some background. Now, if you do an online search for phrases such as student mental health in schools, or mental health in universities, you won't have to read too many results before you come across an assertion that there's a crisis in student mental health. While it's not unusual to use dramatic language to make a point, when the same phrase is used time and time again in different settings by different organizations or individuals, there's probably some justification for that language. There's abundant evidence that the word crisis is entirely appropriate for describing what's happening in schools, colleges, universities, and other formal learning settings around the world. And so here on this slide, here's an indication of the scale of the crisis in the UK alone, and it's replicated globally. So in 2015, a study found, this was a study of the National Union of Students in the UK, that 78% of respondents had experienced mental health problems, 33% had suicidal thoughts. 2018, an Insight Network poll of 37,500 students from 140 universities found that over 20% of those students had a current mental health diagnosis, and over 33%, over a third, reported psychological distress that they felt that they needed to seek professional help for. And by 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, the Mental Health Foundation found that 18 to 24-year-olds were most likely to report loneliness, hopelessness, not coping, and suicidal thoughts, facing what they termed a triple whammy of curtailed education, diminished job prospects, and reduced social contact. So, numerous mental health issues can have an impact on learning. And conversely, teaching, learning, and assessment activities can affect mental health in many different ways. So it's a two-way relationship, really. Just a couple of examples. Stress and anxiety, which are incredibly widespread among students, can have a really detrimental effect on learning. Social anxiety in particular can prevent learners from engaging with activities such as group work or presenting their work to others. And the COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in even higher levels of stress amongst students. Other mental health issues affecting and indeed arising from formal study include depression, low self-esteem, perfectionism, feelings of powerlessness, of not being in control of one's life, feelings of not belonging, not fitting in. And this can affect the ability to form relationships with others and seek support when struggling. And also brain fog. Now, that can be caused by depression, some drugs, and some medical conditions, and that has quite an obvious impact on studying. It's also can lacking a strong sense of self or identity can also lead to low self-esteem, and that can lead to lack of confidence and difficulties making choices, which has also implications for studying. And all these things can affect motivation. Now, my colleague Kate Lister who is here today, has been investigating the barriers and enablers for well-being arising from formal education for her doctoral research. So, Kate, could you please explain the taxonomy you've developed, which is the simplified versions on the screen here?
Sure, thank you very much, Leanne. So yeah, as Leanne said, I've been investigating where the barriers and the enablers lie for students within education, particularly within distance learning. I've been working with a lot of students, a lot of staff. We had 21 interviews, we had focus groups with 116 people, and I've just got a survey back from 580 people as well. So finding out where these barriers and where these enablers lie. It's come down to the fact that barriers and enablers can both be broadly classified into three areas. We have in the bottom here, you can see, and the green quadrant, I don't know what you call that. It's not a quadrant because there's not four of them, little wedge. The environmental barriers and the environmental enablers include spaces, people, systems, and life that you find in education. The skills-related barriers include social skills, self-management skills, and study skills. And then you've got the study-related barriers, particularly around curriculum, tuition, and assessment. And if you can go on to the next slide, thank you very much. So looking at the enablers around those, you can subdivide those areas into quite a lot more themes as well. So, for example, around assessment, things like flexibility in assessment and support can be enablers. Looking at some of the environmental enablers, looking at positive behaviours between family, friends and groups, looking at communities. Social media can be about, an enabler as well. There's lots of different themes in all of these areas. And then if you can take me on to the next slide, Leanne. Thank you. And broadly speaking, the barriers map to these. So many of them are the same. Physical spaces and social media, for example, can also be barriers. Around the skills related side of things, not being able to manage, not feeling confident managing your mental health, or managing negative behaviours can be a barrier, while the positive behaviours can be an enabler. And interestingly for us, in the study related side of things, curriculum, tuition and assessment, all of these things can be both barriers and enablers, depending on the way they're designed and the way that they're carried out in an educational situation. I think that's me, Leanne, if you want to go on to the next one.
Yep. So at this point, it's worth looking at what open pedagogy might involve, and if some of you here will be familiar with it, but others might not be so familiar. And there are many approaches and many definitions, but common elements of open pedagogy include learners having autonomy over what and how to learn, connecting learners with the world outside a formal course, so that's bridging formal and informal contexts. Learners and educators using, creating, remixing, and sharing OER. The big emphasis on co-creation there. Renewable assessment, where learners create and openly share their own assessment tasks. There's an emphasis on openly critiquing other scholarship, openly reflecting on professional and personal development, and also an overarching commitment to social justice and educational equity. And I think that has particular resonance for the study of mental health and well-being. At its best, open pedagogy is about care, about compassion and connection with others. It's about flexibility and freedom, and about breaking down hierarchies and having equal dialogues between learner and educator, and learners and the wider world. And in theory, open pedagogy should be very conducive to motivation and in turn well-being. So Ryan and Desi's self-determination theory identifies three psychological needs as essential to people's self-motivation and mental well-being. That's autonomy, having agency and feeling in control of one's behavior and acting in accordance with one's goals and values. Competence, feeling able and effective, and relatedness, feeling connected with others and having a sense of belonging. Open pedagogy supports all three. However, for some learners, the autonomy and relatedness of open pedagogy may exacerbate or even cause mental health issues. But what we're finding out is that a careful approach to the design of teaching, learning and assessment activities and really close attentiveness to learners' needs can help mitigate this. Now, one framework, Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, with which some of you will be familiar, offers guidance that can help educators ensure that open pedagogy strategies are not excluding learners. And UDL has flexibility at its core, as does open pedagogy. framework was originally developed in the 1990s, and it promotes flexibility in learning and addresses some of the barriers to learner well-being that can intersect in an individual learner and across diverse learner groups. And the related UDL guidelines, they elaborate on the UDL framework, and they're research informed, and they're constantly being revised to incorporate new pedagogies, technologies, and evidence about how people learn. And I'd strongly recommend having a look at this. They're interactive guidelines. You can click through and get much more detail on all of the different elements. It's a really great site. So, according to UDL, equity should be designed into all teaching and learning to meet the needs of all learners. That can be done by providing multiple means of engagement, which we've got on the left column there. That's with the subject and the learning environment to align with learners' interests, challenge learners appropriately, and motivate them to learn. Equity can be achieved by providing multiple means of representation, and that's in the central column there. Representation of learning materials, and that gives learners various ways of acquiring information and knowledge. And finally, by multiple means of action and expression in learning. So that provides learners with alternatives for demonstrating what they actually know. So thinking for a moment about the idea of autonomy that's core to open pedagogy, it's central to the UDL guidelines as well. Learner empowerment and autonomy, that can have a huge impact in supporting learner mental health and well-being. And in contrast, disempowerment and unequal relationships and feelings of powerlessness and a sense that education is something being done to learners can have a negative impact on learners' attainment and mental health. Now, open pedagogy offers learners empowerment and autonomy through practices that include the co-creation and open sharing of resources and the design of renewable assessment, and by reimagining the relationship between educator and learner. The freedom and choice that results can be thrilling. It can be really stimulating for some learners, but it can also be incredibly scary for other learners, especially those with low self-esteem, anxiety, or who lack confidence. That idea of being on your own with choosing your own methods of learning, it can be really, really scary. Fortunately, UDL offers guidance that can help educators support learners in developing the skills and confidence that they may need to be comfortable with open pedagogy. So that's sort of like the interaction between the two, really. And UDL also gives direction in offering alternative options to open pedagogy strategies, so that it's not all one or all the other. Moving on to one of the key features of open pedagogy, the emphasis on connecting learners with the wider world beyond the formal classroom. Now, this has great potential for supporting well-being, because it gives opportunities for learners to feel part of communities beyond those in their institution, and that can really enhance their sense of belonging and offer opportunities for peer support, especially around mental health issues too. Talking about mental health is really, really important. But sometimes it's easier to do that away from a home institution than it is with the people you're studying and working with all the time. This sense of belonging can make it also easier to develop meaningful and positive relationships with others, and to participate in shared endeavours, and to pursue common goals and develop support networks. But if someone feels that they don't fit in, they're less likely to have support networks to draw on, can feel anxious about any disconnect with their values and those of others. I think on the plus side, that the learners who feel a sense of belonging tend to be more resilient, better able to handle personal and learning related challenges, and more autonomously motivated. And they're more willing to ask for support from peers and educators and other people. And at a time like we're in at the moment, when physical connections with others are difficult, online connections and collaboration is particularly valuable, really, and that can help to combat isolation and loneliness too. Now, I would mention that isolation and loneliness have long been identified as a key cause of mental health problems for people of all ages. And Mental Health Foundation suggests that long-term loneliness is associated with an increased risk of certain mental health problems, including depression, anxiety, and increased stress, and is at a really high level at the moment due to lockdown all over the world and the restrictions we're all facing. So this emphasis in open pedagogy of connecting learners with the wider world can also support identity formation, especially where learners are connecting with communities with which they've got things in common. And that in turn can increase learners' motivation. So that's sort of the positive side of the emphasis of collaboration in open pedagogy. Collaboration can also be problematic, though, especially, as I said already, for people with social anxiety. And that's a persistent fear of social situations in which a person's exposed to unfamiliar people or to possible scrutiny by others. And that can lead to panic attacks at the most extreme end of things. And group work and collaboration can be unbearable for people with social anxiety. So one way in which educators can mitigate against this is by following the principles of UDL and carefully planning collaboration-related activities and providing learners with multiple options for such work, so including the option to opt out. So having the opportunity to dip in and dip out according to how somebody feels comfortable is really important. Also for learners with social anxiety, a technique called graded exposure can be helpful for educators to explore when planning collaborative activities such as those in open pedagogy. And the technique was originally developed by psychologists to help people combat their fears. And in the context of group work, graded exposure might involve social or collaborative tasks being broken down into small manageable steps, with learners taking small steps to begin with and gradually building up to a bigger task. Now, as we all know, I think a further challenge with open online collaboration is the safety aspects involved. And students with anxiety and other mental health issues can be particularly vulnerable to trolling, hate speak, cyber violence, and other forms of online abuse, and may find it particularly difficult to cope. Now, educators taking their students to open online spaces as part of an open pedagogy strategy have a responsibility to support those students' development of safe online participation skills, and that could really help with that and that sort of collaboration. And in fact, will actually benefit all learners, especially in this age of surveillance capitalism. Now, moving on to something that's really at the heart of open pedagogy, the use and co-creation and sharing of open educational resources, or OER. The availability and flexibility of OER makes them a really powerful tool for enhancing learner well-being. So, for example, they offer educators opportunities to find out about new alternative pedagogies in the interest of offering learners flexibility in the way that they learn and the autonomy to make decisions about how they learn. So OER offer a time-saving alternative to creating resources from scratch, and they could support educators in addressing mental health issues in the curriculum, either directly or through a curriculum fusion approach, like, for example, embedding discussion of mental health in a drama session. And there's a wealth of high quality open content that can be adapted to suit local needs and settings. And that can better align with learners' interests and preferences to allow educators to better respond to their learners and to better represent their identities and backgrounds in course resources. And that's really, by increasing the relevance of resources, can support identity formation, increase our self-esteem, and increase motivation. So the well-being benefits for learners are clear too, as OER can be used to support offering learners a choice of ways in which to access course content. And learners can be given the autonomy to search for OER that are relevant to their own interests and which will help them to achieve the learning outcomes of a course or a lesson. Now, the open pedagogy strategy of co-creating OER for contributing to the commons can be really motivating and can enhance self-esteem. So for many learners, it will be necessary to scaffold the necessary skills to avoid the activity causing stress and anxiety, and that's something that educators can do to help with the process. And just going back to our embedding mental health micro-credential, the learners who were educators on that course, they've been experimenting with the co-creation of OER across multiple sectors, in fact, producing posters, toolkits, revision guides, additional course resources, and ebooks that were then openly shared. Kate, I'm taking, would you like to say a bit about renewable assessment and how that works out?
No, I'm happy for you to do it. I'm sorry.
Okay then, right then, okay then. So thinking about renewable assessment, so that's where learners are completing assessment tasks that are contributing valuable knowledge and resources to the world, rather than assessment tasks that generate disposable outputs just read by a tutor. And it also involves learners perhaps designing their own assessment. Renewable assessment has got huge potential to support learner well-being in its emphasis on learner autonomy, which is really important for well-being, on learners having control of their own learning, and in having the opportunity to design assessment that fits with their preferences and interests. Clearly, the possibilities for increasing learner self-esteem through this and motivation are really considerable. Now, we're really heartened by the fact that learners on our Embedding Mental Health micro-credential reported back on their experiments with renewable assessments and shared quite a lot of experiences. Most were really positive about the impact on their students' well-being and motivation. One learner had set first-year nursing students the assessment task of making an ebook covering self-care strategies relevant to nursing in the pandemic. And this was for sharing within and beyond the institution. Another learner was teaching sport and physical education and was experimenting with asking her students to make videos demonstrating swimming strokes and other sports techniques, and those videos that then could be shared as open resources. So you can see the sort of creativity that's coming in here. A college educator had shared how her students were making posters for local community groups. There was a bit of caution amongst primary school educators who were concerned that this level of independence required by open pedagogy would be difficult for young children. But that said, some applications in primary school settings were actually shared, including one assessment whereby students wrote stories for younger children in the school to read. And that gave these primary school students a real sense of there was value to what they were producing, and that obviously is good for well-being. Obviously, renewable assessment is not for everybody, and it can be challenging, especially for people with existing mental health problems. The level of autonomy involved, where learners are asked to design their own assessments, can be really stressful for some learners, especially those with anxiety, as can the lack of structure. And also the prospect of sharing the output of an assessment task with the wider world can also cause anxiety, can be really scary. Again, though, UDL, going back to UDL, adopting a UDL-informed approach and offering learners flexibility, and the choice of either open or regular assessment tasks should help ensure all learners' needs are met. And as for those other aspects of open pedagogy, there's much that can be achieved by scaffolding learning and scaffolding the skills needed to engage in open practices. So to conclude, and thinking about this overarching theme of social justice and educational equity that pervades open pedagogy, I think that a mindful UDL-informed approach to implementing open pedagogies in ways that support rather than undermine mental health and well-being is likely also to be an approach that foregrounds educational equity and is deeply attentive to students' needs, again, in line with the principles of social justice at the heart of open pedagogy. It's really important that students with existing mental health issues are not excluded by open pedagogies and are able to benefit from their affordances, but on their own terms.
Leanne, I forgot to give you a time warning. So we're at 10:30.
Okay, yep.
Thanks.
Okay. So applying the principles of UDL regarding flexibility and offering alternatives to fully open activities should allow learners to engage in open pedagogy related activities as and when they feel comfortable in doing so. Now, I'll just end by saying that there is a need for much more work in this area, especially in the current circumstances of the pandemic, where we're moving online and there's much greatly increased mental health problems amongst everybody, really. And there's much more, there's a need for work bringing together experts in mental health and also experts in openness. So everybody in this conference, I think, has something to contribute there. We hope we've given you some food for thought about some of the issues that need further exploration. And thank you very much for listening. And Kate and I would be very happy to take any questions as well.
So it is the end of the session, so people may leave if they would like to, and if you want to stay a few minutes and take questions, that would be fabulous. So you can unmute yourself and ask questions if anyone has anything.
In the comments, there's some really interesting questions coming up in the comments.
Or do you have?
Okay.
Can you read them, Leanne? Would that be easier? Because I've got.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Okay, so from Leticia Campos, what measurements and procedures would you consider essential on the faculty level to assure mental health of students are being considered?
Oh, that's one for you, Kate.
Probably is one for me, actually.
It is.
Yeah, sorry, here's me setting myself up to answer questions. So thanks for that, Leticia, first of all. That's a great question. So for me, there's very much two sides to the mental health question. There's the proactive side and the reactive side, and both of them are equally important. So we need to be making sure that we're proactively embedding mental health considerations in all of the teaching and learning that we've got, so that we're very much as Leanne has said, so that we're designing learning that is inclusive and that doesn't trigger unwarranted stress, while recognizing that a certain level of stress is important, but scaffolding students through to help them manage that. But then at the same time, embedding those reactive processes so that when a student is distressed or when they are experiencing issues, that we can jump in straight away and support them and stop it escalating. So there's quite a lot of different things there. Some of those will reside within the faculty and some of those will reside in different areas, student support areas. But the main thing is that everybody's working together very much as a partnership, and we don't have this kind of sense of, oh, right, so you're experiencing a crisis, so you have to go over here to the student support team. But at the same time, not placing undue pressure on lecturers and practitioners as well. So I think the partnership approach is probably the easiest, not easiest, that's the wrong word, but that's the answer that I'd give. I hope that helps. Let's see some other ones then as well. So Leanne, one for you from Jim Stauffer. I'm interested to know if anyone has explored, oh, it's flicked, here we go, has explored open pedagogy in relation to collectivist/individualist society spectrum. How can open pedagogy avoid being seen as self-aggrandizement?
Oh, very good question. I'm not aware that anybody has. I think looking at, it's still early days for research into how open pedagogy is being applied, and in looking at open pedagogy in a sort of a wider context of theories of learning. And so I think that there's a heck of a lot of opportunity for people to pick this up, and also apply a theoretical lens, as you're suggesting there. Open pedagogy has been accused of self-aggrandizement, to use your term, and I think it's a sort of a fine line when any sort of new theory or new approach emerges. I think initially there can be sort of skepticism and suspicion, but the people who are doing the innovation in open pedagogy, and there's a growing body of people at the moment, but just there on the ground trying it out and sharing the results and so working things out themselves. And I think Robin DeRosa has done some great sharing of some of the experiments she's done with her learners. And I think a key point here on the way to having this sort of theoretical perspective and locating open pedagogy in that wider theoretical context is seeing more and more results of people's use of open pedagogy and the impact on learners. So I think there's like an empirical stage in the middle of research with learners. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's all I got.
We've only got 33 people left, so I think most people, there have been lots of really nice comments thanking us for the presentation, which is lovely. I've just had a question that I wouldn't mind answering if that's okay before we move on. Is that okay, Karen?
Yeah, we have 5 more minutes, but I may have to leave in a few minutes myself.
Sure, I'll try and answer it really quickly. So Karen has sent through a question: how much of the fear and anxiety that students might have in working in public or having to choose their own pathways is based on how we're grading them? I found that taking away the fear of grading goes a long way towards addressing student anxiety.
Oh, sorry?
I could hear somebody talking then. Okay, not to worry. Yeah, so I just wanted to really address that and say, Karen, absolutely. I think a lot of it is coming down to grades and assessment. And that's the thing that educators aren't addressing very much. So in my role, I talk to a lot of different universities about things that they can be doing to support mental health of their students. And a lot of what universities tend to focus on is let's build up their skills, or let's build up the sense of community. And these are all really, really important things, but nobody's willing to look at assessment and grading. And in my survey from students, which I've just got back hot off the press with 580 odd students, 62% of them said that assessment was the most important thing as a barrier to their mental well-being. So I think absolutely a lot. And yeah, I think it's great that you're trialing doing that in your setting, taking away that fear of grading. So that's everything from me. Just to say thank you very much to everybody. I don't know, I'm passed over to Leanne for the last word.
That was wonderful. Thank you. I learned.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate, for handling the questions. That's brilliant.